The greatest moment in American sports history?
That to me is one of the best stories of a heavyweight fight.
Oh, Joe Louis taking out Max Schmeling. World War II.
U.S. against Germany, black guy against a white guy. It was like you couldn't draw more divisive lines at those times.
And his people agree to give him a percentage of his purses for the rest of his career to get the fight.
What?
Yeah.
Really?
In movie theaters, the movie was stopped in the middle and the fight was broadcast over the loudspeaker.
Put it into a context. This is not what Hitler wanted. There was no other figure like him. He clearly was being punished.
Roosevelt asked Louis to come to the White House and said, "We need muscles like this to defeat Nazi Germany."
Boxing enthusiasts and fans will immediately recognize this soldier as Max Schmeling, former world champion and now a paratrooper in the German army.
The army can use that fighting spirit, and Joe Louis is now a corporal of cavalry, somewhere in the West.
We are about to experience an indescribable event in our lives.
I think that's the greatest single event in the history of the world.
All right, quick break. We've just dropped some fresh gear at Brawls.store. Whether you're stepping in the ring or cheering from the sidelines, we've got you covered. Snag your top pick now at Brawls.store. Links right there in the description and pinned comment. Don't miss out.
Joe Louis, tonight, this is your life. Now, to get all the answers, in your case, Joe, find out what makes a champ, let's go back to 1914.
Born in 1914 Alabama and raised in Detroit, Joe Louis found boxing as a teenager, using it as a way out of poverty. By the mid-1930s, he was unbeaten and feared with 20 knockouts and 24 wins. But being black in that era meant the path to the top was nearly impossible. America still hadn't forgiven Jack Johnson, the only black heavyweight before him, whose defiance infuriated white America. He stared at white women, was a constant attendee at whorehouses, and used to mock white opponents while beating them up. The whites hated him and vowed never to let any black American step into the ring.
Joe, I'm satisfied you're going to be the next heavyweight champion of the world. I hope so. Well, Joe, as your manager, I'm going to do everything possible to get you a chance to fight for the championship. Thank you.
And he did just that. This is John Roxborough, a boxing manager who looked past the racial barriers and believed in Joe's potential. Knowing the public wouldn't easily embrace another black fighter, he devised a clever strategy and came up with a set of rules for Joe.
He could not gloat over opponents. He could not be seen in public with white women. He had to be seen as a Bible-reading, mother-loving, God-fearing individual, and not to be too black.
Born in 1905 in a small German town, Max Schmeling discovered boxing as a teenager after watching a silent film about the sport and quickly fell in love with it. Turning professional in 1924, it took him just 6 years to rise through the ranks and become the heavyweight champion of the world. Charismatic and well-spoken, Max became a beloved figure in Germany. He was invited to elite gatherings, rubbed shoulders with celebrities, and became a national icon. But behind the glitz, Germany was crumbling. Rampant inflation, joblessness, and street violence plagued the nation. As the Nazi Party rose to power, Max didn't support their ideology, but to survive, he knew he had to play along. Before facing Joe Louis, Schmeling was scheduled to fight in New York in 1933, but just before his departure, he was summoned by Hitler for a private meeting where an agreement was laid before him.
And toward the end, Hitler says two things. If you run into problems, feel free to contact me if I can be of any help. The second thing he says is, when you go to the United States, you're going to obviously be interviewed by people who are thinking that very bad things are going on in Germany at this moment. And I hope you'll be able to tell them that the situation isn't as bleak as they think it is. And that basically was the contract under which the two of them would operate from that point on. It certainly was a devil's contract.
After arriving in the States, Schmeling held a press conference. Many journalists were waiting to hear about conditions in Germany. Schmeling told them that everything was okay and quiet in his home country. He denied that Jewish people were persecuted.
While Schmeling was building his career in the US, the younger Joe Louis was tearing through the ranks, obliterating every opponent who dared to stand in his way.
The fact that Joe Louis was winning without any dispute over white America. He was our nonviolent, violent way of expressing ourselves.
Though many were drawn to Joe's inspiring rise from poverty, a large part of the public still couldn't stomach the idea of a black contender. For them, their hope came from across the Atlantic. The fight was announced, and most believed Schmeling was walking into a beating against the undefeated Joe Louis. But Schmeling thought differently.
I think that he thought that he could outthink him, that his brain was better than that of Joe.
While Joe Louis took the fight lightly, spending his days on the golf course, Schmeling was hard at work, meticulously studying Louis through old fight reels.
Have you detected any particular weakness in the brown bomber?
Yes, I did, but I won't tell you.
During the weigh-in, he walks up to Joe Louis, shakes his hand, says, "Hello, Joe, how do you do? Good luck this evening, Joe." Joe Louis and the press are perplexed by this show of courteous bravado.
In the early rounds, both fighters were testing the waters, sizing each other up. Schmeling stayed patient, waiting for the perfect moment to exploit Joe's weakness. And that moment arrived in the fourth round.
Every time Louis jabbed, he'd return his left hand low at his side rather than up here where it's supposed to be, where he could block a counter right hand.
Schmeling backing away cautiously, waiting for some opening that he wants. Schmeling cut over a right hand high on Louis's jaw. Just made Louis knock his head. Schmeling has sent Louis down. Joe Louis is down.
You saw Joe Louis's hand drop. And when that hand dropped, he came over with that right cross. After that, it wasn't Joe Louis anymore. He was just a punching bag.
Round after round, Schmeling punished Joe with relentless right hands. Finally, in the 12th round, he sealed the deal with a crushing knockout blow.
Step Louis with hard rights and left to the jaw. He has puffed up Louis's left cheek, and Louis is down. Louis is down, hanging to the rope, hanging badly. He is a very tired fighter. He is blinking his eyes, shaking his head. The count is done. The fight is over. The fight is over. And Schmeling is the winner. Louis is completely out.
Joe's defeat sent shockwaves through America. Hope gave way to silence, and both the media and public turned on him. Their hero had fallen, and fallen hard, outboxed by the older, underestimated Max Schmeling.
When he finally did go on the streets, kids being who they were, would run up to him and say, "Max Schmeling, Max Schmeling." And I think it got to him because was he still their hero? Was he still the great Black Hope?
While America fell silent, Germany erupted in celebration. Max received a hero's welcome, with thousands flooding the streets to greet him. Hitler, who initially buried the fight from the public, fearing a loss, was now proudly screening it in theaters across the country.
Jetzt steht Joe Louis auf matten Knien im Ring, verteidigt sich noch, aber hat keine richtige Kraft mehr. Aus dem gefürchteten braunen Bomber ist ein armer, zerschlagener kleiner Negerboy geworden.
Amid the celebrations, Germany's reality was darker than ever. Nazi rallies filled the streets, new laws banned Jews from civil jobs, and violence and executions became more frequent. Some argue that Max stood by in silence, doing nothing to resist the regime. Others believe he quietly pushed back, pleading with authorities to help Jews and those targeted. He even rejected an award from the SA, a prestigious honor bestowed by the Nazi Party, signaling quiet resistance. Despite the chaos in Germany, Schmeling's boxing career surged forward. He was now set to face heavyweight champion James Braddock for the world title. A contract had already been signed, but this sent Joe Louis's camp into panic. They knew that if Schmeling won the belt, Hitler's influence could make it nearly impossible for Joe to ever get a title shot. Desperate to keep that dream alive, Joe's promoter, Mike Jacobs, made Braddock an offer he couldn't refuse, effectively snatching the title fight away from Schmeling.
He started offering more money, more money, more money.
So finally he came up with a deal, said, I'll give you not only the biggest guarantee, but you will have 10% of the profits of Joe Louis's fights for the next 10 years.
Joe dominated the bout and knocked out Braddock in the 8th round, becoming only the second black man in history to claim the world heavyweight title. But something didn't feel right. His face showed triumph, yet his eyes told a different story.
Even in a moment of triumph, knocking out Jim Braddock, when people were congratulating Joe, your champ, Joe said, no, I'm not the champ. I'm not the champion. I won't be the champion until I lick Schmeling.
Across the Atlantic, Max Schmeling was outraged after the title shot was taken from him. He filed a complaint with the New York Athletic Commission, determined to get his chance.
I think I got a runaround. I traveled 25,000 miles to face Jimmy Braddock for the title.
Eventually, his persistence paid off, and he got his shot. This bout was no longer just about boxing. It had become a clash of nations. The Nazis couldn't bear the idea of a black American defeating their prized fighter, while Americans refused to accept what they saw as a Nazi-backed fighter standing in their ring.
This was 1938. Hitler's intentions were clear by then. Hitler's hatred of Jews was clear. And Schmeling is probably unfairly seen as an extension of Hitler. He's seen as a Nazi.
In 1938, Roosevelt asked Lewis to come to the White House, and I'd like to slap his muscles around and said, we need muscles like this to defeat Nazi Germany.
Max Schmeling was a very terrific boxer. He was not a Nazi. Certainly he was a German, and in those days any German was considered a Nazi. I think Adolf Hitler used Max Schmeling in terms of the political propaganda, just as Franklin Roosevelt used my father. These were two strong, powerful men representing two strong, powerful countries, and obviously the outcome was significant for both countries. Of course, that was the irony. I mean, my father was representing freedom and democracy of the United States, but he couldn't live those freedoms. He couldn't eat where he wanted to eat. He couldn't be educated where he wanted to educate, couldn't live where he wanted to live. The United States in the 30s and 40s and 50s was a very segregated society. So while he represented that and certainly transcended to be an American hero, he couldn't experience all the freedoms of all Americans.
So much was on the line for both men. For Joe Louis, another loss meant total ruin. He had already felt the sting of defeat, and this time, the shame would be far greater. For Schmeling, the stakes were equally dire. There were whispers and reports that he would be killed if returned to Germany with a loss.
It's June 22nd, 1938. Joe Louis defends his World Heavyweight Championship against former title holder Max Schmeling, the only man who has ever defeated the champion.
I'm going to be in the best of shape, and I'm sure they're going to be a very good fight. I'm happy that I have the chance again to fight for the title. And I hope the best man may win.
The stage is set for their historic rematch.
When Schmeling was walking down to the fight, they were throwing apples, bananas, rocks, everything at him. The whole atmosphere was that Schmeling represented Nazi Germany.
Joe Louis in his corner, prancing and rubbing his feet in the rosin. Max Schmeling standing calmly, getting a last word from Doc Casey, and they're ready with the bell just about to ring. And there we are. And they got to the ring right together with Arthur Donovan slipper ring round them. And Joe Louis is in the center of the ring, Max going around him. Joe Louis led quick with two straight lefts to the chin. Both of them light, but as the men clinch, Joe Louis tries to get over two hard lefts on the far side of the ring now. Max with his back to the hook, and Louis hooks the left to Max's head quickly and shoots over a hard right to Max's head. Louis, a left to Max's jaw, a right to his head. Max shoots a hard right to Louis. Louis with the old 1-2. He's landed more blows in this one round than he landed in only 5 rounds of the other fight. And there, Max Schmeling.
Just a minute into the first round, Louis delivered a crushing body shot to Schmeling, one that clearly shook him and changed the course of the fight.
Again, a right to the body, a left hook, a right to the head, a left to the head, a right. Schmeling is going down. But he held to his feet, held to the looked to his corner in helplessness. Is watching carefully. Louis measures him. Right to the body. A left up to the jaw. And Schmeling is down.
Schmeling's corner tried to end the punishment by throwing in the towel. But when the referee tossed it aside, they rushed into the ring.
The count is 5. men are in the ring. The fight is over on a technical knockout. Max Schmeling is beaten in 1 round, in less than a round.
The winner and still champion, Joe Louis!
Joe Louis had done it. America erupted in celebration as the crowds filled the streets cheering his name. In that moment, color lines blurred and the nation stood united behind their champion. But this wasn't the end of their story, only the calm before a darker chapter. The two champions would cross paths again, though not inside the ring. As Joe basked in glory, a shadow loomed over Schmeling's world. When Schmeling returned to Germany, he was met with silence. No crowds, no meeting with Hitler, no honor of any kind. Overnight, he had gone from national hero to a nobody.
They dropped him like a hot potato. They had lost every interest in him.
Schmeling's boxing career dwindled. After a few more fights, he quietly faded from the spotlight. Meanwhile, a year after their bout, Germany plunged into chaos. Nazi-led riots erupted, targeting Jewish communities. Homes, hospitals, and schools were vandalized and looted. Amid this darkness, one man cast aside caution and chose to stand up and help.
My father asked Max Schmeling to take me into his house, and he took us for 3 days. At a time when he had no benefit. My father was not a rich man anymore. Everything was taken away from him. There was nothing this man could gain. He brought us back to our family in his car. And this car was 3 cars like this in Berlin. So everybody knew this was Max Schmeling. If this wouldn't have happened that night, I wouldn't be here tonight.
A few months later, Germany plunged into full-scale war. Despite being past the draft age, Schmeling was conscripted into the German army.
That was clearly a punishment. There was no other figure like him, a star in the cinema world or a major athlete or anyone else who was sent off to war. He was 33 years old and obviously way beyond the age where it would be a fighting necessary. He clearly was being punished.
While performing a jump in Greece in 1941, Schmeling worsened the back injury he had originally suffered in his fight against Louis. As a result, he was declared unfit for military service.
That husky young Negro en route to an Army induction center is the heavyweight boxing champion of the world, Joe Louis, the boy who beat Max Schmeling. The Army can use that fighting spirit, and Joe Louis is now a corporal of cavalry, somewhere in the West.
Following his win over Schmeling, Joe Louis went on an incredible winning streak and later served his country in the military. But America didn't return the favor. He was placed in a segregated unit and relentlessly pursued for back taxes, even on the money he had donated to the Army and Navy Relief Fund. Adjusted for today's value, Joe Louis's donation would exceed $1 million. During the war, he frequently participated in exhibition matches to lift the spirits of American troops. To repay the debt, he kept fighting long past his prime until his storied career ended with a loss to a rising star, Rocky Marciano. Louis's life spiraled into turmoil. He battled drug addiction, and his health began to deteriorate. Buried in debt and overwhelmed by hospital bills, he found himself abandoned by the very country that once hailed him as a hero. It was then, unexpectedly, an old adversary of his decided to show up.
And the only one you lost? I won that one on June 19, 1936, at Yankee Stadium in New York.
Yes, he's here, Joe, himself, a former world heavyweight champion from Hamburg, Germany. The back, you are to the right, Max Schmeling.
It's been more than 20 years since they've seen each other. Schmeling stepped in to cover Joe's bills and provided financial support whenever needed. This marked the beginning of a new friendship, with the two meeting many times afterward. When the nation you once brought glory to turns its back, only a fellow fighter who's walked the same path can truly understand the weight of that betrayal.
From time to time, Max sent funds to assist my father in some of his medical care. Max was very helpful to my father's wife, Martha. The fact that he was always there and always cared, living, 5,000-6,000 miles away, because he really deeply cared for my father.
Long after leaving the boxing ring behind, Schmeling went on to establish one of the major Coca-Cola franchises in Germany. In 1971, Joe Louis relocated to Los Angeles, but his health continued to deteriorate. He depended heavily on the generosity of friends, including Max Schmeling. In 1981, Louis passed away from a heart attack, still burdened by over $1 million in debt to the government. Yet, that didn't stop his friends from honoring him with a grand funeral attended by more than 3,000 people. Schmeling couldn't attend in person, but he sent someone special in his place, the young boy he had once saved years before.
Max Schmeling is on the phone from Hamburg. He says, Henry, Joe Louis died. His coffin is displayed in the ballroom at Caesar's Palace. And I would be very appreciative if you accept that I cable you a large amount of money. That you put in an envelope, and all you have to do is go over there and give the widow of Joe Louis, Mrs. Louis, this envelope and say it's one Max Schmeling. I went over there. I was sitting next to Mrs. Louis on a chair, and I talked slowly saying, Mrs. Louis, here's an envelope from Max Schmeling. Oh, she says, Henry, Max Schmeling, our true friend.
Joe Louis was laid to rest with full military honors, finally finding peace after a turbulent life. Decades later, Max Schmeling passed away quietly at the age of 99 in 2005. Two rivals, forever linked, not just by punches, but by respect, redemption, and an unlikely bond that outlasted war, fame, and time.